All right, welcome to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Anthony Smith from Wichita Falls Independent School District Police Department in Texas, 13 years in law enforcement. Really looking forward to hearing his perspectives on wellness and leadership. So, welcome to the show, Chief Smith. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's definitely a privilege and I appreciate it.
Of course. No, I'm really looking forward to it. When you said 13 years, and we kind of related to that, we're like similar in age. So I'm excited to hear your perspectives and insights being a younger chief. And you promoted pretty quickly in your career, correct?
Yes, I started off as a patrolman and then I got promoted to patrol supervisor. From there, I promoted into the narcotics division, ultimately promoting to detective sergeant and leading the narcotics division.
Did you always know that you wanted to be in leadership, or how did that happen?
You know, I never really thought about, being in leadership as from a standpoint of, a command level leadership position. I enjoyed, being on the SWAT team, being involved. I enjoyed being the one that was, working in narcotics and not managing it. So I think, when I was in narcotics, that was kind of really as high as I imagined myself really wanting to go.
And here you are.
Right.
It's interesting to me because almost every chief that I talk to, not everyone, but almost everyone is like, I never ever wanted to be chief. They were like, I was so happy with where I was. And then we hear this statement of like the people who do really well and work really hard kind of get more of that work and more of those opportunities and they kind of fall into that space. When you were promoted to chief, were there any, specific goals or things that maybe you wanted to do differently than you had maybe seen with previous leadership? Or did you have, specific, aspirations within the organization?
Well, so to answer that question, so I spent the majority of my career within a city police department.
Okay.
So just the backstory. So I'm from Buna, Texas. It's a rural place in Jasper County, Texas, and I love where I'm from. Anywhere I go, I'm always proud to say that I'm from Buna, Texas, just because I feel like the community there, from coaches, friends, parents, they really had and my parents really had a great impact on making me who I am. So I'm always proud to say I'm from Buna, Texas. But so I was working in the narcotics division at a city, and the police chief job came open in Buna, in my hometown. So I essentially went from working in plainclothes narcotics on a Friday to moving to a school district, to be not only moving there but to be the police chief, which was super foreign to me. And thankfully I've relied on lots of great folks at different agencies and school-based law enforcement, and relied on our ISD Police Chiefs Association. That's really impacted me and helped me grow.
It's interesting because, we always talk about the career, and I think sometimes we also forget that you as a chief of police are also human, and there's a whole nother side of the coin to you than just what you do, although that is very important and valuable in what you do, but there's also home life and there's other things that, you have going on. Can you give us a little bit of insight into who you are outside of the career?
So outside of my career, I'm a huge Cowboys fan. Um, Family is extremely important to me. I have three boys, two that live in Hawaii with their mother. Um, they come and visit in the summers. They're here the entire summer, and I try to see them. I saw them a couple weeks ago in California watching my middle son play football. And then I have my baby boy. He's 8 years old. He has a pretty rare genetic disorder called Bardet-Biedl syndrome. He was born with it. From that, there's various different things within that disorder. What he's dealing with is pulmonary hypertension, congenital heart defect. He's had three surgeries for that. He has pulmonary hypertension. He was on oxygen until he was about 2 years old, around the clock, oxygen and stuff. So that was definitely challenging. Also with that, he has what's called polydactyly, and it's bones formed where they shouldn't be. So he had to have surgery on his legs. That was another surgery that he had to do and be in a cast and wheelchair for a little bit. But if I pointed him out to you in a room, you would never guess that. He's super intelligent. He's got a heart of gold. Uh, you know, and he's, I'm a little soft to him. I love all my kids, but he's had a tough life, and he's been phenomenal and just moving forward with it. And we just treat him like any other kid.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. And how do you manage both? How do you find the time and the balance for your home life and, your kids and everything that you have going on top of also being the leader of an organization? Do you have any strategies or tactics that have kind of helped you along the way to be able to manage both of them?
Yeah, absolutely. I really think that it's just you know I think what I would call a newer philosophy, maybe not, but that work-life balance. I think it's extremely important. There was a time in my career that I would stay to the office until the work needed to be done. That I would volunteer for things, but now the way I look at it is if I can do the work on my laptop on the couch, at home with my family, then that's where I need to do it. Even if it takes me a little longer, if it takes me an extra hour or two from distractions, so be it. I'm at home. Um, but here in Wichita Falls, that's something that when I moved here, because my hometown is about 5.5, 6 hours away. That's where my little boy is in that area, my youngest son. And one of the biggest things about moving here was I said, hey, that's not going to affect, um, me being a father. So that entails, me driving there every other weekend just as normal. Um, sometimes I stay with relatives, but more often than not, I go grab him and bring him back here. So I make sure to put family first. He had his first t-ball game last year, and I actually think it was on like a Wednesday. I actually took off, left work, drove 6 hours, watched a 45-minute t-ball game, went and had ice cream, and drove straight back to be at work the next day. And um, I'm not. That's what you're supposed to do. That's what I think most any dad would do in the same situation.
Yeah. Thank you I think it's such an important reminder. And, I'm not saying that you can make every single thing work. There might be a circumstance where you absolutely cannot make it for whatever reason, but I really truly believe that you will make time and you will put your time and your energy into the things that are important to you and the things that are a priority to you. And so I really appreciate you saying, even as a leader of an organization who has a lot of responsibilities, who's really busy, you're still saying, hey, I'm going to make it. If I can make it, I'm going to be there, and I'm willing to drive 6 hours to make sure that my kid has the memory of me being there. Because at the end of the day, that's what they're going to remember. They're going to remember that mom or dad were there, and I had a chief one time say, um, no one's ever going to remember the overtime that you worked except for your family. And I thought that was such a powerful statement because it's true. They're the ones that are going to remember when you weren't there because you had to work. And so, of course, like I said, giving grace, there's going to be times where you maybe can't make everything, but I truly believe that if things are a priority, you can make them happen.
Absolutely. And for me personally, that's leading by example, because there's not an officer in this department that if you asked, they would not respond to you and tell you that not only are they allowed to go to their children's events, but I expect it.
Mm,
Um, it's one of those things that I'll tell them, whether they're just joining the department or whether it's department meetings. Like, I don't want to hear about you not going, barring something that's there being a reason. I don't want to hear about an officer being behind on a report, having this, having that, and not attending and being there for their kids. So it's really important to me. I think that goes a long way with wellness. at the end of the day, if your home life is not okay, it's going to affect your work life as well.
I really like that you said it's expected. To me, that was an entire shift. Like I could feel that shift when you said it. And I think a lot of times people feel guilty for doing those things, right? They're like, oh my gosh, they're not going to think I'm a team player, or, people are judging me because I'm gone. But you saying, hey, our leadership team, this is an expectation that you are there. And if you're not there and you could have been there, that's the problem. It breaks the entire stigma of that and the anxiety that comes along with it. And now people are not only going to prioritize it more, but they're going to feel safe to do so without the judgment.
Absolutely.
Yeah. As a leader, so I know, we talked about this a little bit. You are a younger leader, and I think that it allows you to connect with the younger generation as well. So far, how are you able to kind of connect and relate to your team? And what is maybe the most valuable leadership lesson that you've learned throughout your career?
You know, I've been lucky enough to have many good leaders in my life, whether that was, growing up in my hometown, in the Marine Corps, and in my law enforcement career as well. I've had many good leaders and many bad leaders. And, I think the biggest thing that I've always looked at is being the leader that you wanted and that you needed at that time. I can think at several points in my career where, I needed this. They had that knowledge, but it wasn't given or it wasn't passed on. So I think some of the biggest things is not forgetting where you came from, and making sure that just because I'm the chief of a department doesn't mean that I don't need to be looking back and grabbing hands and trying to elevate officers and bring them up. But so it's just taking care of the people you work with. Uh, I don't like being called boss. Um, I don't refer to people as my employees, my officers. Um, I don't introduce them as this is my. Even though I know a lot of chiefs, they do it in an affectionate way, and it's meaningful to them. This is one of my officers. I'm sure to introduce them as, hey, this is my coworker, because at the end of the day, that's what we're doing. They don't, I want them to follow me because they choose to, not because they have to. And just having that rapport and having that relationship goes a long way towards that.
Yeah, I like the statement of never forgetting where you came from and also learning from the people before you that maybe didn't make you feel great, but then also learning from the people who did make you feel really good, like taking all of the good stuff, but then learning from some of the bad stuff too. One of the things I struggle with, and I'm curious on your opinion, because I agree, and in my profession, my life, I really try to be so caring and I like truly care for the people who are on my team, and like maybe to a fault. And I've found it challenging to find the balance of being like a friend and a mentor and someone who like cares and is bringing you up while also establishing the fact that I am the boss. I'll put that in like quotes, because at the end of the day, there is that like that level of where like I still have to make these decisions and like there still has to be things that are done and there's still expectations and things that I have to set. How do you find that balance where it's like, yes, we are a team, we're all on the ground, boots on the ground together. I'm holding your hand, I'm bringing you up, but I am still quotes. I'll do quotes. I know you don't like to be called the boss, but I am still, kind of the boss. Like how do you find that line?
Well, and to go back when you talked about good and bad leaders and stuff, a lot of things, most things, I can't take credit for. Obviously, I learned it from somewhere else. And one of those uh, great individuals I worked for was a gentleman by the name of Earl White. He was the constable when I was working part time for him, but he's actually the fire chief in Beaumont, Texas. But I remember being new to his agency, going somewhere, and this is a guy who's a well respected, a pillar in the community, and introducing me to people and as a coworker. And it's like he has all this knowledge. He's up here to me, and I'm down here, and he introduced me as a peer when he could have said, this is one of my deputies, this is whatever, and that's always went with me. The way that I'll lead, I definitely more often than not, or most often, I'm not the smartest person in the room. I don't expect to be. I think that it doesn't matter if it's the most junior officer we have, up until myself. I think everyone has different perspectives, different ideas, and collectively we can work together and make things better. So I get a lot of feedback. There's times that just because I have the power to make decisions doesn't mean that I shouldn't be getting feedback, guidance, perspective from others. So in our department, I think officers know that um, I want to hear your feedback. I want to hear uh, your opinions, but at the end of the day, it's ultimately my decision, and that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Um, but it's important to me that I get that feedback and that perspective from officers because I'm not the one that's in the campuses every day. I'm not the ones that's doing a lot of the things that they're doing. So you know I look at it as my job is to support them and give them the tools they can, give them the tools they need to do their jobs to the best of their abilities.
Yeah, I think that feedback is so valuable because we have a way that we tend to think, right? Like we have our own perspectives and perceptions on things. And when you can have a number of other people who have different perspectives and different feedback, it's so valuable for us to learn and to evolve and to develop ourselves individually and as a whole. So I really like that a lot. One of the things we talked about was, proactive versus reactive measures, especially in the context of wellness and taking care of your people. And there are a few things that you say that you do all the time to make sure that people feel like they are valued and really trying to create a culture of wellness and positivity. What are some of those things that you do to try to be proactive and just make sure that everyone knows that they are valued?
Well, one thing that I try to do, and it's rare that I don't take the opportunity to do it, even if I'm busy, is I just look at myself when I was that young patrolman, and you might be at home with 103 fever, you have the flu, and you call in and say, "Hey, I'm not going to make it to work today." The response you get might not be the one you expected, or whatever, and I remember being at home with fever and just having that sense of anxiety of they probably don't believe me, they think I'm faking or whatever. And if someone's sick, you should take their word for it. You should believe that. Obviously, if there are times that something needs to be addressed, you do that. But if you have a team and everyone is part of that team, uh, you shouldn't be thinking in a negative way. You should be checking on them. So that's something that I do. If we have an officer that's out there sick, I'm going to shoot them a text. Hey, do you need anything? How are you? Just to let them know that, hey, one, if they do have that sense of anxiety that I had when I was a young patrolman, that to hopefully ease that. And then to let them know that, hey, look, you're not just a number. You're not just somebody that works here. You're somebody that I care about, that we care about, and we want to make sure you're okay.
Yeah. I like that you said you're not just a number. I think that we have to really understand that this is a world full of humans and we haven't been replaced by robots yet. And when we talk about culture and teamwork and wellness, we have to understand the human element behind it and making sure it. I've never ever met anyone who doesn't want to feel like they're valued and recognized for the hard work that they do. And I think that when people feel like you care, that helps with not only retention, people want to stay and they want to work for people who care about them, but also longevity, in their career, but also in their lives.
Absolutely.
How do you think, we talked about this a little bit offline, but how do you think creating a positive culture also relates to recruitment? You guys have seen this a little bit internally, so I was hoping that you could kind of explain what you've seen and how creating that positive culture has helped.
Yeah, so here in Texas, at one point when I joined the department, we had 8 officers. So there were 8 of us in the department, and then we had House Bill 3 that was passed into legislation that was House Bill 3 was became law and essentially required every school district in the state of Texas to have uh, for us it would be a police officer on every campus. So we have about 15,000 students and staff, um, a lot of campuses. So it overnight essentially brought us from that to tripling in size.
Mm.
So with that, there's a lot of unknown. You've got folks that are working in cities, municipal police departments, working at sheriff's offices, and this is a very very different type situation. And there's a lot of unknown. So we just focused on slowly reaching out, trying to hire good quality individuals, and we really haven't had to do a lot of recruiting. I don't think that we've had anyone that we've actually recruited. Not to say we're not trying, just like everyone else. We're still not at full staff. We're at about 25 officers currently, but it's our biggest recruiting tool has been officers joining our department, seeing the culture here, buying in, seeing the difference that we're making, and telling their friends that former colleagues, hey, you need to be a part of this. And it's
Yeah.
been very successful for us.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I've heard a few things. There's two things I want to touch on. One, if people like to be somewhere, they're going to tell other people. And so having that foundation first is only going to help not only with retention, like we said before, but also recruitment. I have another agency that I work with, and they have really focused on their wellness programming and taking care of their people and building that culture, and they were doing a job fair, and there was a bunch of other agencies that were there for this, job fair, and they were like, you know what, we have all the things, we have all the bells and whistles, we have all the opportunities that, anyone coming into this career may want. They had SWAT team and they had canine, they had all the things. And they were like, we're instead of focusing on that, because we do have that, we're going to focus on our culture and what we offer for supporting everybody and what we offer for our wellness programming. And that's what we're going to lead with. And they had a line like wrapped around the building. And other people had, like, some people coming and going, but they by far had the longest line because, and I would love your opinion on this, but from what we understand, the younger generation are also looking for that. It's not all about the paycheck anymore. It's about a work-life balance, it's about an agency that's going to support me, that's going to care about my wellness and my longevity. And yes, there are a lot of people who want to do certain assignments within their career, but a lot of them are looking for an agency that's going to take care of them.
Absolutely, and that's something that me as the leader of the department, something that's it's important to me. So looking at ways to think outside the box, looking at, hey, we don't have take home cars, or there was a time that we were looking at, hey, we're losing take home cars, keeping them. That's something that I was very much for, and that's because take home cars. There's reasons that you can articulate of why they're a good thing, but at the end of the day, it helps officers with fuel, being able to not have to switch cars and forgetting things, and all around it's a positive thing. So that was a good example, and then you go from take home cars to well, we have some officers that might be a single mother or a mother or father that or a single father or a parent that has to drop kids off. So now they're having to essentially trade vehicles because having the student in the vehicle and things like that. So that's something that I identified and looked at and said, hey, let me go to my supervisor and see if we can get a resolution to this, so they're not having to do all this car switching because two things are going to occur. Either they're going to do it anyways and that's not good. Um, or we can help them with something that makes sense, and that made sense. It got approved. So now officers, instead of having to switch vehicles and all those things, or bring their child to school, go back, get their unit, whatever the case was, now they can just ride to school with mom or dad.
I think too, like one of the things is like, how can we save time and eliminate hurdles so that there's time for other things, right? And I've related this before because I'm a visual person, and so I visualize you guys as, like the circus performers that are like, balancing something on their head, and then they have the plates and they're spinning it, and then they're like juggling with the other hand. And, it's like you have so much going on all the time, and you're really trying to balance home life and work life and kids and soccer and shift work and overtime and all the things that you guys have going on. The more we can create ease and eliminate some of the hurdles and create more space and time for people to be able to prioritize their family more, for people to be able to decompress and rest. Instead of having to swap out cars, now maybe you have extra time with your family. Maybe now you have time to go and do a 30-minute workout because you don't have to spend the time doing certain things. So I think that if we can look at everything that we do and try to figure out how can we make it easier, better, and how can we eliminate hurdles so that there's more space for people to have that time for themselves and for their family. One of the things I wanted to ask you, because, this is an interesting dynamic that I'm seeing right now. And we talk about stigma when it comes to wellness. And a lot of the conversations are that the stigma is with the older generation, and with the younger generation coming through, they're more open-minded, and therefore there's not, as much stigma. I've actually seen that there still is a stigma with the younger generation, but more in the context of like, I don't need it. I'm invincible. I feel good. Like that's a problem for later. And a lot of the stigma coming from like peer-to-peer judgment. What have you seen, and how do you think that we can create more normalcy in the wellness space?
Well, I think that is definitely a culture thing. When you have those departments that it's frowned upon, or it's a hey, you know, don't do that. That's going to end your career. If don't say this. That's definitely a culture thing. But you know, I've been to lots of different trainings and leadership things, and we always, it's talked about, I don't know what it's specifically called, but when you're talking about, generate Gen Z, millennials, I think that for me, I think one of the biggest misconceptions with that is I truly believe, this isn't based off of any kind of data, but personally, I truly believe that age does have a factor, absolutely, in some things. If we look at technology and stuff like that, but in many ways, I feel like how you were raised, um, whether that's at home as a child, as a or whether you went into the military, whether you went into law enforcement, whether what kind of structure you had, what activities you participated in, that upbringing from your parents, it's different. Some parents are raising their kids like it's 30 years ago. I think that all that really plays a role in it, and we can't just put people based on the ages in these different boxes, because I think most of us can think about different people that they're supposed to be in this box and one's supposed to be in this box, but they're opposite. You have
Yeah.
that young officer that's supposed to have that work life balance that's important to them, and they don't care about that. They like to work and they like to do these things. And then you have that officer that might be a veteran officer that of 25, 30 years, that hey, they want the work life balance and they don't care about this. So I think to make wellness normal and break stigma, I think it's really just talking about it. um, I think that my time in the Marine Corps was the same way. A lot of those guys, Iraq, Afghanistan, stuff like that. It just, or Vietnam for those guys, even. It was just things weren't talked about, for the same reasons. Just in your career, made fun of, ostracized, all these things. And with law enforcement, I think it's actually, in many cases, there's a lot of similarities there. Hey, I was in Afghanistan for 7 months. People are in Afghanistan for a year. Iraq, yeah, that's different, but they come home. In law enforcement, you're coming home every day. You're coming home to your family every day. You're not over here and you're not completely focused on that, and then you have a chance to come home.
Yeah.
You're every day going, and it might be from a critical incident at 10 p.m. and then helping with a car accident at 11 where there was a child injured. So I think that the biggest thing is wellness, and with wellness is making sure that there are tools in place, and making sure that officers have access to those, like the Texas Law Enforcement Peer Network. Doesn't take 10 minutes. I've done it. It doesn't take 10 minutes to send an email out to your officers and say, hey, look, I actually did this recently. Hey, look, we're coming up on Veterans Day. I know some of you are veterans. I've had numerous individuals that I've served with. And when I say served with, I went to their houses and knew their kids and knew their families that have taken their lives. So I reached out to officers and said, look, Veterans Day is coming up. So are the holidays. Those are hard times of year for many folks. It's okay not to be okay. It's okay to have bad days. Me personally, in the last 2 years, I've lost my dad, I've lost my grandmother, and I've lost my younger brother in a car accident. That's not easy, but you know I believe in God. I believe they're in heaven, and also I have to go on. I have to address those things. But it's okay to have bad days. But move on. Don't stay there. If you need help, ask for it. It's great that there's all these different ways that officers can reach out that are anonymous. But it's my job as a leader also to make sure that they know about them, that they know that, hey, I support you. And at the end of the day, I just want you healthy, because healthy you is what we need in the workplace. And again, if we care about you, we care about your health, we care about your well-being. So
Yeah. I really like that you said that we're not like painting a broad stroke over people and generations. I do think that I was at a first responder conference and someone was doing a presentation on this and they were talking about, every generation is going to talk about the next generation, right? There's always like, it's happened forever, and it'll continue to happen. But I really like that. And I think if we're going to recognize that each person is an individual and unique and valuable, that painting a broad stroke and just being like, like this generation, those kids, they don't know anything or they don't have work ethic is a disservice to the individuals within the organization. And I think as an individual, we've all been through that, right? Like we've all had the older generation kind of say things about us, and it is hurtful because I think we're like, well, it's not actually true. Like I actually have a really strong work ethic. No one can outwork me. That's always how I've lived, but millennials are known as like maybe not having as strong of a work ethic as other people, and so I think that to understand that every person's going to be different, to look at every person as an individual and then try to figure out, how you can communicate with them and how you can support them is really important. I also like that you said that breaking stigma is a culture thing, or having a stigma is a culture thing. And so building that strong foundation and culture is the key to breaking that stigma. But then also talking about it, being proactive. And I kind of want to circle back to what you said before, because I really liked it that like it's an expectation that wellness and taking time for your family, that is an expectation of the organization that you do that. I think it's such a strong position to have. And so I kind of wanted to outline all the things that you said: culture, communication, being proactive, having an expectation that people are going to be prioritizing themselves and their family.
absolutely.
Did that encapsulate it okay?
Yes, yes.
Did I
I'm
do it
sorry.
justice?
Yes, yes. I'm
Um,
sorry.
So my final question for you is, and I know you already gave so many great words of wisdom, but it is for the younger men and women who are entering into this career. What words of wisdom would you share with them? You know, something that maybe you wish you would have known earlier, or something that's helped you along the way.
I think the biggest thing, a couple things is one that you're human. You're going to have bad days, you're going to have good days, you're going to have those calls that stay with you, and that's normal. Talk about it. If you need to get help, whatever it is, don't be afraid to do so. So you're human. It's okay to it's 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 not good if you don't have emotions or reactions. That's a bad thing. When some of the things we see in this profession, they are going to affect you, and they should. If you're human, those things can stay with you. But finding positive and healthy ways to cope with it is extremely important. And another thing that I think might be the biggest is that your family is your family. It's important to have. I get it. You spend more time with your coworkers than you do with your own family typically, but your family is extremely important. They need to be prioritized because you know I know this. I know that my family loves me and I love my family. I have great coworkers. If I needed something, I have no doubt my coworkers would be there. But if I left here tomorrow, those calls are going to get less and less and less. And that's why I think that a lot of times you see veteran officers that retire and they really struggle because they go from talking to their friends who they consider family every day. They're talking to them every day, and then slowly they start getting on the outside of things, and those calls get less and less and less, and then ultimately they're not even talking to them. And then we've made sacrifices with our family, whether that's divorce, whether that's not knowing our children and things like that, not knowing grandkids. We've sacrificed those things for this family that's essentially gonna be away, I guess you could say.
Yeah. I can relate to that on a deep level, and it's honestly one of my biggest regrets in life is prioritizing work over family because you don't get that time back with your family. And I know that you've gone through some recent loss, and I'm really sorry to hear that. And um, it's during those times, at least for me in my life, it's during those times of loss where you have a lot of reflection of, could I have spent more time? Could I have been more present? And I think if we can live every day and understand that our time is limited always, and family is always going to be there, even when you lose your career or you transition into a new career, the family is kind of that solid foundation and that rock. I think that helps us to put our time and energy into those spaces. And it's not to say that you can't show up and give 100% for your coworkers or for your career. I think two things can exist at once. I think the challenge is when you put all your eggs into one basket, and then like you said, that goes away, and then what are you left with? And so I really appreciate your words of wisdom of prioritizing your family and having an identity outside of the career.
Absolutely. And thank you for everything that you're doing, Paige. I think you're doing a great thing. You're spreading awareness. And I appreciate the opportunity to come on here and talk with
Of course. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
you. Thanks.